Okay, good morning. It's Friday, November 29th, and I should probably just get my balance. There we go. Good. Standing on a balance board. Morning, Eleanor. How are you this morning?
I'm excellent. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Let's do that usual thing and talk about what you've been working on. And then I've got a bunch of questions for you. I got lots of stuff on the mind today.
Oh, okay. Well, um, my books with Ra are um, currently being implemented, and they should be done pretty soon. I designed the cover. I'm keeping the cover that we had so that it's the source material is preserved.
Was that the image of the three matrices?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that from last week.
We
Okay.
were what we used with what Ra used with me was the human design chart, the solar dream design, and the lunar dream design. Uh, at that time that we did the books together, I had not yet calculated the lunar minute dream design. So all we had was the meditating design and the REM design, but not the sleep design.
Okay.
Um, So those are being published. I I'm doing some YouTube readings. Two of those I did today, one I did before. So there should be three YouTube readings up on my YouTube channel pretty soon. The ones I did today were pretty interesting. Uh, and as I'm working with the Tree of Life and my classes, I'm seeing more and more in the charts that I hadn't seen before. And I'm working pretty hard on the paths of intelligence in the Tree of Life. And those are informing me also at a whole other level. So, um, doing that and
Are there, sorry, a question there. Are there any, like you said, some interesting things coming up? Are there themes or patterns that you're seeing with the evolution of it? Or what specifically are you noticing?
when the human design um, is a synthesis of multiple disciplines. And what my work has shown is that it is a scientific system. I validated the structure of the human design chart. Many of the things that Ross said did not hold up, but the integrity of that sacred geometry and its connection to the tree of life does hold up. And so as I am carefully going through the tree and correlating it with what I already know and have found within the body graph, it's like opening up a wider understanding of what the actual body graph is and the dynamics and the layers of it that you can't get to without understanding the multidimensional matrix,
Right.
which itself is coded into the tree of life. And so um, when I'm looking at a chart now, uh, I see other things that I didn't see before because I didn't have the language.
Mhm.
Uh, so it's pretty interesting. I'm working now on the 26th path of intelligence on the tree of life. And there are three paths that go from below the self center into the self center in the tree of life. And they are called portals. And you cannot move into that level of initiation or consciousness until you have mastered self deception. And believing things that come from the mental world that aren't true.
Mhm.
And so most people get stuck at the lower triangle of the tree of life, which keeps them in the emotional trauma of the mental world existence. And
Yeah.
until that is unraveled internally, you cannot advance to higher levels of consciousness. So all of the psychobabble about consciousness and all of that, many people think they're conscious, but are not. And so one of the telltale signs is how their life operates in practical terms. What are your relationships like? Do you love what you do and do what you love? Are you healthy? Are you in good shape in your body? All of the worlds have to be integrated and honestly evaluated.
Mhm.
So honesty and truth is key.
Yeah. I feel that what you just said. And that those what do I want to say? It's a lower vibrational energy in those in those lower chakras, right? They can get stuck there. Shame, rejection, all those things. And
Well, you're
significantly
talking
people will
about,
stay
you're
there.
talking, make a differentiation
Okay.
between lower chakras, which can be highly conscious,
Mhm.
and the mental world emotional reactivity that brings negative self talk uh, that has no place in spirituality.
Mhm.
And the mental world keeps throwing garbage at us.
Mhm.
And when you catch it and you think it relates to you, you need to send it back to its source or you contaminate it.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, One question I want to ask, and you probably explained it in class. You're each week we're going over I just forget the word separate. Like we're going like the 27th path, the 28th path. How many paths again are there? Is it 33?
32.
32. Okay, 32 paths. Um, I feel like in class you started with the 27th and moved up to the 30th, but I may have misremembered the order of that.
No, I started with 32.
Okay,
I
so
did
we've been
31,
working
30.
backwards. Okay, yeah. Funny, in my mind, my mind is floating around 30 for some reason, 29 lately. Anyways, I'm not even sure that's a question.
Well,
Other,
29 is between the root and the solar plexus.
Mhm.
And that is where many people get stuck.
Mhm.
Because when we're challenged in our life, if we succumb to the emotional reactivity rather than asking the key question, okay, God, what is so important that you would put this in front of me?
Mhm.
And how do I get through this with grace? Um, Looking inward for truth and recognizing that rising to a higher consciousness, regardless of the challenge, will get you further than going into negative emotion.
Mhm. Um, I don't know how to express this necessarily, but I feel it when I go to visit my parents lately. So I will go and sit and play cards with my parents. We play a game called Five Crowns, which is kind of like a deck of cards, but there's a fifth deck, which are stars. So anyways, it's a fun game, good game. And I've been doing that fairly regularly, like meet them once or twice a week, spend time with my parents and their dogs. And over the last couple of months, something has shifted in that I would feel their energy even between the two of them. So like in the mental world, my mom's a manifestor, my dad's a generator. And the more I've looked at sort of how their energy flows, they just bump into each other a lot. And I've always felt it and felt the need to solve it. So in the past, I now recognize that I would step in and always bring almost like breaking up fights between my parents. And not always to the best results, because I can be sarcastic, I can be funny, sometimes it's not appreciated. So it's been a very interesting last month or so. And I think a lot of it has been these conversations and waiting, not responding, just sitting there, feeling the discomfort at times. You know, like my father's, he owns a car rental company and he's constantly getting screwed around by customers and even the insurance company. And he's just got on this mission to fight the insurance company. So he even just seems to crave it, right? He seems to be finding the fights. And yesterday he was, you know, telling one of his stories about how frustrated he is that this person ripped him off. And I just let him finish and I didn't interject. I didn't try to solve it because he keeps in the same pattern. And and then when I didn't respond, I could almost see a look in his eyes like, huh, I just got to talk about it. It's done. You know, we're not moving on to some sort of action that isn't going to help anyways, because it's already a shit show with whatever the situation is. Yeah, but I can feel the discomfort and it like sits in me. All of a sudden I've got aches in my body that I didn't have earlier in the day. Like I can really feel it. And I recognize it's not my own. So I just have to kind of like,
Have you ever verbalized it to him as his?
I think I have been lately, but I'm trying to find the way to deliver the message as well.
Mhm.
You know, my dad's,
Have you asked him what he would actually like to have happen?
no, but I have been doing that lately. So that's a good reminder. Yeah, it is actually the best question in a situation. You know, not you always or you never, just what would you like to have happen right now? How can we smooth this out right now or take an action towards smoothing it out? Um, and I guess that does come from not letting the emotions drive anything. I can feel it in my body and only recently feeling so clean in my body and being able to replicate it. Like I'm there a lot of the, oh, thanks, man. I'm there a lot of the time, but I can really tell when it's not mine now. Whereas I was just always tight, always sore. So I had no idea whether it was my issue or someone else's. So that's been a very interesting exploration.
It's huge.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how, like, I mean, I actually think I know how others can achieve it based on things I've learned about like shedding stuff. Um, I'm just so amazed. You know, the one, I said, just stuff coming out of me, but I'll talk to people about trauma, and almost any man I ever talk to, it's like, I don't have any trauma. Everything's been good. You know, like that's just what men seem to say. And I recognize that I was 3.5 years ago as well. Like, just, no, I'm fine. Everything's good. No. And it's so uncomfortable, even just starting to dig or, you know, admit that maybe your belief about something could shift. And there's a physical and emotional mental adjustment to be made with a new belief.
That's
Because,
right.
right, there's the outside appearance.
Especially if your underlying assumptions upon which you built
Mhm,
turn out to be faulty.
mhm. And if they
And
came, oh, sorry. Well, I was just gonna say, and if they came from your family, you know, that was my belief system, right? I didn't have my own belief system. I had my adopted belief system.
Hmm.
And
I don't think that's an accurate statement, Sean.
no, okay.
I
So,
think you did have your own beliefs.
hmm,
And as you recognize that some of the beliefs that you took on, like you put clothing on, no longer fit.
hmm,
They are outdated. They're like old torn clothes. They don't make you feel good. They don't add to your life. They detract from it.
hmm,
And so I believe from my clinical work that every person I've ever seen, their pain was that their soul was not acknowledged and validated. So everybody knows the truth. They need to open to receiving it and to validating what they know to be true, separate from their belief systems. And it gets tricky,
hmm.
as you know.
Okay.
I
This,
grew up in such a um, it wasn't dysfunctional, but the I grew up around communist atheistic people, and I was not that. And for whatever the reason, I confronted it.
mhm,
So I took a lot of flack growing up for having different viewpoint than most of the people in my family. You know, remembering, for example, a past life as a nun in and past lives as a scribe doing penmanship. So I would say things, and the looks I got were priceless.
mhm,
But it took a lot of standing up to different perspectives. And I remember one of my sisters getting very angry at my brother and his wife because they were arguing with me when I was 11 years old. And my middle sister said, how could they be doing that to a kid? You know, sort of trying to rip me apart for me not believing communist ideology.
mhm,
And my sister reaming them out and saying, how could you do that to her? She's a kid. You know, you don't talk that way to a kid. And me saying, I don't care. I'm not going to change what I know. So, so much depends on who you are as an individual
mhm.
and what you take on and what you don't.
Yeah, I mean,
I think, Sean, if you track back, you will know that you didn't buy into a lot of what was being said.
oh,
Wouldn't
for
be
sure,
where you are now.
for sure. Uh, and it, but I also realize I've taken stands on things I hadn't thought through. So that's what I mean by borrowed beliefs or borrowed assumptions. And actually, when I think about just playing cards again with my dad last night, um, he still reads the news and he gets frustrated by it and he's not getting anything from it, right? And I can't remember what he was talking about, but like, so and so did this. Can you believe it? And even as he said it, it's like, no, I actually don't. Like that doesn't even sound like a person would do that. So then I started asking questions. Where did you see that? Where did you read that? And then there's this sort of, and he's getting much better, but there's sort of like this affront, like how dare I go, I don't know, that doesn't sound legit. Let's look together, you know? So I realized like I was never intimidated by my father. Um, but I just kind of assumed he was right for some reason. Like at some point adopted that. And it's really uncomfortable, even at 52, to be like, yeah, no, I don't see it that way. I mean, it's not uncomfortable anymore, actually. It's uncomfortable for him because it's new to have me respond that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'll just say this for anyone else listening, because it took me a while, but when I've been working on boundaries for a few years now, and it really was so uncomfortable at first that I couldn't just say no or I disagree. But I learned that I could nuance things by saying no, but, or yes, if. And that was kind of like that was a temporary step, allowed me to get comfortable with
You
saying no.
can you can try yes and.
Yes, and. So that's working. Is that kind of like win-win kind of? That's the idea? Like we're working toward.
When somebody says yes, but the other person tends to turn off.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
say yes, and the other person opens up.
Oh, I like that. Hmm. It's funny at the time. Yeah, that would have been helpful earlier. But at the time, it was a like, and I was listening to a podcast I just did with Nama the other day, and we were talking about the solar plexus, and I kind of talked about how I sort of take it for a spin, like I'm reevaluating emotions with people, and so I actually think it was useful to go through the no, but, and yes, if, because I felt some discomfort. And then I
Mhm.
got recon from the other person, like how are they going to respond to the new info without being no, you know? So it's still a valuable
Oh yeah.
phase, but I think yeah. So anyone listening, yes, and that's easier, or actually more smooth, and probably kinder for the other person too, because if they're getting response that, after 30 years, you get a different response from someone that you thought you knew. It's uncomfortable for everyone
Oh,
involved.
I'm thinking about some of my narcissistic clients through the years who, no matter what you said to them, it was always yes, but. And it was a way for them to not ever change.
Yeah.
Because their but was their defense. So when you shift it and you say to them, okay, so if it was yes and, what difference would that make?
Mm,
You give them another way of thinking
yeah.
instead of the pulling away from dissonance. You give them a beginning way to have the dissonance and see that two different, maybe contradictory things can exist in the same space. And maybe they can then have a relationship with both things.
Mm. Yeah, even just having a different opinion on things and being okay with that.
Mhm.
From
So
my
that's a huge start.
yeah. Hmm. Okay. Now I want to shift gears. I was in the shower this morning and had a little, I was just like, I gotta say this. So I started thinking about the phrase in my head popped in, get my houses in order. And so I thought, oh, that's an interesting, isn't it usually you get your house in order? And I started thinking about that, and I feel like I am. I'm doing all the things to address my energy. I'm building good practices, so I'm getting my house in order. But what came in my head was get my houses in order. And then I was thinking about class this week, or not, no, the webinar, and Pluto and Aquarius, and you had um, astrological charts up. And one thing I spotted in mine was that I have three houses that have nothing in it. Now, I don't know what that means. Is that something to think about? Is it a theme? I want to know how to get my houses in order currently during this Pluto and Aquarius, because I seem to be lit up like a Christmas tree. And I can feel it. I'd like to navigate it. So, and I guess the other thing to that is I don't want to use astrology for predicting, but I wrote down you building life around no, use astrology, but not base your life. Yeah, no, see, my notes don't make sense anymore. Anyways, open.
I don't live my life by astrology.
Yeah.
I don't plan my life by astrology. And generally, I don't even look at the transits
Mhm.
because I don't want to be influenced by anything outside of me that might interfere with what's right for me.
So, and just on that note, do you check the transits when you're like, huh, there's a curious energy in the air and you just use it to validate it once in a while, or you don't even look at all?
No.
Oh, okay.
Recently, I ran my chart to see what was going on. And I went, oh, Pluto's going into Aquarius. No wonder, I can present my work to the public.
Mhm.
That's what it was. Uh, so I'll do it retrospectively. But one of the questions that I asked all of my astrology teachers was, how would you know I would have done this instead of something else? And what could you say about it? And they were stumped. The only astrologer who ever got it right was Catherine de Jersey. And I think she did it the way I do it in short, sort of intuitively. You look at the whole picture and you see what's going on. And yeah, I can predict things from an astrology chart, but I generally try not to
Mhm.
because we have choice. And astrology does not compel us.
Mhm.
So it's better to look at wider trends than smaller trends. And one of the things that I've dealt with in the last couple of weeks is this Pluto moving into Aquarius, which is big.
Mhm. Mhm.
Since has not been in Aquarius since 1778 to 1798. And the other interesting fact is that the 1 year birthday of Pluto from July 4th, 1776 to this year is one revolution of Pluto around the sun, fell on June 14th, 2024, President Trump's birthday. Whether you like him or don't like him, the fact that there is this cosmic connection says something
Yeah,
in
something's in the
terms
air.
of what's going on in the world situation that is bigger than any one of us on a personality level.
Mhm.
And we all know that the energies over the last few years has been chaotic and politically very suspect. The world leaders have not always done the most conscious thing.
Mhm.
And so, regardless of what our political views are, it is important to recognize that it is not personal, it is not individual. This cosmic energy is way beyond anybody's individuality.
Mhm.
It is a shift in the cosmic consciousness that's going on. and we don't know where it's going to end up.
Yeah, and you mentioned it in class or in the webinar, but like the last time Pluto was in Aquarius was the French and US revolutions, right? So for folks tuning into this, like that was a nutty time, and led to great change, right? But you had to have disruption first. And that's what it feels like right now is um
Well, I don't know that we need disruption.
change.
Um, it could be smooth. It can be easy. Uh, we're in the Aquarian age. It means consciousness, freedom, individuality, uniqueness, inventions, um, forward thinking.
Mm,
And to the degree that people resist that, there's pain. To the degree that we embrace it and move ourselves into consciousness, it's easier.
mm, mhm. Um, cool. Can we look at the houses? Can you talk about that a bit?
Sure. Do you want me to look at your chart or the Pluto?
Um, or both, or if there's any interplay there. My one question that still stands, because it came from that shower download, was getting my houses in order. And I just, I looked at, I don't, very little experience really with reading an astrological chart.
Okay,
But
so
what I noticed in the one that you had for me was at one point, so there was three houses that had no placements at all. And I've not seen that a lot. So I wondered if that was significant. That's something to observe.
let me look. Let me share my screen.
Sure. You should be able to.
Okay. Uh,
Yeah, you have permission.
this is your astrology chart.
Yeah. So there we go. The eighth house, the 10th house, and the first house. So I don't know if that means something, doesn't mean anything, but I'd like to learn a little more.
Well, the eighth house is consciousness. Um, the 10th house is how you present yourself to the public and often career or whatever you do with that. And the first house is personality. Um, you have two cardinal houses and one fixed house that are not activated. But the North Node and Mercury, 5 and 6 degrees, is aspected to the cusp of your eighth house. Your sun is opposite the 10th house. The you have a aspect here between the ascendant and the 5 and 6. So you can look here and see that there are things. And the fact that you don't have anything is really pointing out that those houses are not activating in that area of your life. Now, when we look at the progression, we see there are some things that are in those houses, not the 10th house. So you can read it as empty, Or you could read it as all possibilities exist there. Which do you choose?
Oh, the latter.
So, when you're looking at an astrology chart, there are different ways to look at it. If you look at my chart, for example, which I did here, because when I was doing the Pluto moving into Aquarius, in my chart, I have an Aquarius ascendant. And so you can see in my natal chart, my first, second, and third house are completely empty. Nothing there. Nothing in my fifth house. Does that mean I'm not creative? Does that mean I don't have a personality? Does it mean that I don't have resources? No.
Yeah.
It means that it's not an issue for me.
Issue or theme?
Issue.
Okay.
The first house is personality. The second is money, self-esteem, resources. The third is early conditioning. The fourth is the core of yourself and what formed it. The fifth is creativity. I don't have anything natally in the third house, the house of writing. And yet I'm a prolific writer.
Yeah, you said something there that I really want to tap into now. So the third house is early conditioning. So, when you talk about your childhood and, you were standing up for yourself, and it sounds like your mother was supportive with that. My experience was different. I feel or remember or believe. So like with yours, it's wide open, it's not an issue. It's so what is my third house, for example, based on that? I'd be curious to hear what that is, because I feel like I was heavily potentially like
What sign are your parents?
that's a good question. I've never looked at their sign. Let's see.
When are their birthdays?
That's what I'm looking for, because I don't actually know their signs. What's the eighth month? August
This
20th.
month is August.
Yeah, August 20th is my father.
And your mother?
Gotta dig that up next. Oh, well, that I know, because it's the same day as my wedding anniversary. I was being very crafty when I got married. So July 9th. That way I could never forget it again, because I forgot it once.
My daughter's anniversary is July 9th.
Oh, okay.
Her birthday is July 8th. And okay. So your father is on the cusp of Leo to Virgo.
Okay.
And your mother is a Cancer.
Okay.
So your father on the cusp, what year was he born?
44.
And your mother?
I'm pretty sure 46, but let me just confirm that. Yeah, 46.
I just want to see. You don't know the time, I assume.
My father, I just had it. Actually, I'll give you my mother's first.
Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Mother. Your mother was July.
July
Wait a minute.
9th.
July 9th, 1946. At what time?
6 o'clock a.m.
Where?
Liverpool.
Okay. And your father?
August 20th.
Wait a minute. Aug 20.
1944.
Yeah.
3:45 in the afternoon. So 15:45.
Where?
Glasgow.
How do you spell Glasgow?
Glasgow.
That's how I did it. Okay. England.
Scotland. UK.
Yeah, I know. 3. Okay. So,
And I want to preface with I have great parents and loving parents. But it just seems like so much happened in our family history of belief around lack, um, secrets. So it's just interesting. Like I don't, I feel like I knew I spoke up for myself, but was always afraid to, but I was never abused, hit, you know. I think I was sent to my room often, probably, for timeouts. But yeah, I just realized like the last couple of years, I'm just unraveling beliefs about everything. Like everything has gone back to basics, and like, what do I believe about this? So
I can share. How do I want to do this? Well, let's play it this way. I'm going to stop this share and I'll start a different share. I'm sharing my astrology program. So this has your chart, your mother's chart, and your father's chart.
yeah,
So look at your father's chart in this third wheel. If I swap 1 and 3, and then I just share your father. Talk about empty houses.
that's chaos, isn't it? What does
What?
that mean? Is that chaos? What does that mean? That's a lot of empty houses.
Um, well, you don't, I mean, for one thing, he has 2 houses in Scorpio that are empty, and his ascendant is Scorpio. He's a Leo sun, a Virgo moon, and a Scorpio ascendant. Now, the Scorpio ascendant squares his sun in the 9th house. He has very strong values, very strong values.
Mhm.
He represses his psychic ability and his intuitive ability. I would be interested in seeing how your mother interacts with his Uranus, and also looking at his integrated human design or noble energy map. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planets in Virgo. And then if we stop this share for a minute and start, well, yeah, I'll do it this way.
It's
And
interesting.
we
It's like he's firm in his values. Like he is unshakable concrete in certain things, but
oh,
some of them, based on my experience, I think are not well informed anymore. But he can't seem to shake from them.
I don't know why this one isn't opening. I wanted to, let me get rid of this one. That should be a reopen close tab. Oh, there we go. I wanted, oh no, that's not it. No. I wanted this one. So I will get rid of this and I'll put it back. Hold on. There's a method to my madness.
Take your time.
Charts for readings. No. Ooh. Why am I not getting it? Huh. Oh, because I'm in the wrong folder. That's why. Here we go. I wanted this one. There we go. I wanted to look at where it was for your dad. I
Mm.
wanted to show how many people are people here live?
Yeah, we got a few there.
And so this chart shows the movement of Pluto in the different signs through the 1800s. And your father was born in 44. So the Pluto was in Leo for the first 12 years of his life. Then it moved in to Virgo from 56 for the next 15, 16 years of his life. So if we look at his chart,
By the way, that date range thing has been a very interesting exercise as I've been reflecting on it over the last week. Like the themes definitely tell a story. I'm so amazed by his like
oh,
this
wait,
picture. I just see two giant triangles.
hold on. Let me share my desktop instead. Then you can see everything. Okay, so I ran his chart, right? And we know he was born in 44. So the Leo was look at the Leo influence. When he was born, how many years it was in Leo, impacting right on his ninth house ascendant.
Okay.
So your dad's early years were very focused on forming values and standards that he lives by. And his integrity, as he identifies it, is really important to him. Um, from the time he was 12, for the next 15 or 60 years, it was transiting all of these planets that he has in Virgo. Activating Jupiter, activating Venus, activating the moon, activating Chiron. Your dad was being influenced to be responsible, um, work hard, and probably was told if you work hard, you'll do well. And the challenges that came up to him as a kid, as a teenager, he was supposed to be responsible and not feel.
Mm.
And the eighth house, North Node in Cancer and Saturn in Cancer, all of his caring, all of his desire to be intuitive was probably shut down.
Mhm. Yeah.
So your dad grew up in an environment with Pluto that was constricting him rather than expanding him.
Mhm.
Now, if we look at your mom,
Ooh. Oh, okay. Still, oof.
all of those houses, your dad has 8, 9, and 10.
Yeah.
He has none.
Mhm.
And she has all those houses. So together they're like one person. And she sees things very differently than he sees things because she's, you know, dealing with her personality. And look at how her personality in Leo is going to interact with your dad.
Mhm.
Now we can switch them. Or we switch them.
It's so interesting because they adore each other,
Of
but
course they do. They're
but they
like,
but they
they
can't agree on
complement each
anything.
other.
But they couldn't agree on a single thing at the same time. So it's interesting, but I could feel that friction and somehow always felt a responsibility to fix it. And lately, I've been not fixing it and or reteaching them how to empower themselves, even just with basic things. Like I realize now I had a lot of people that I was
Look, Sean.
doing. Hmm?
Look, Sean. Look at the composite of the three of you.
So I don't fully still understand what I'm looking at, but what do you see when you say
Well, just look at it. Don't try to interpret anything, just look.
hmm.
You're on the outside wheel. You
Oh,
fill
okay.
in where they're empty.
Hmm.
Here, 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 here. Every place, if we switch them, and you're on the outside, right? Now, if we move you to one, swap 1 and 3, then here you are at the center. And then you can see which houses they're impacting for you. So you don't have the 10th house, but look at how they fill it in.
Hmm.
Your mother with your father with the Leo, and then wanting you to be responsible. Take your power, son, and be unique, but do it in the way I want you to do it. And your mother is saying, well, let him do his own thing. But don't step on your dad's toes. Did I get that?
Yeah, yeah. And it's taken a long time to just push back, and no one was doing anything intentionally untowards, but yeah, I it's funny. Even last night, I'm sitting there playing cards with them, And I want to talk to them about their will because they have decided that my sisters are in charge of their medical care should they need it in that situation. And my sisters are much more into the world as it is right now. So I worry about suffering and things like that. My parents have put me in charge of dealing with their material things. I don't want any of their material things. I just want them to be healthy and happy. But I'm going to be put in a position where I'm going to have to argue with my sisters because I don't have a horse in the race, but I know they will. And it'll be confrontational. And for me, it'll probably be the last time that we communicate. I worry that that'll be because I'll just be like, that's enough.
You have one sister?
Two sisters, younger. Yeah. And so last night I wanted to say to them, like, you know what? Can I be removed from that responsibility? Like they can have everything. I would rather have a good relationship with them post my parents' departure. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't even last night broach the conversation. I felt like it was like, and I partly was like, well, maybe not ready to have this conversation yet, but I realized that it's top of mind. And so even just while we were playing, I was like, oh wow, that's really interesting that
Well,
I
maybe
feel comfortable having that
it's not the right thing to do, Sean.
Yeah, I thought that as well.
Maybe there's another option,
Mm,
which is for you to say to your parents, I don't want to be responsible for making decisions for you about what you'd want done. Can you give me directives
oh
that
yeah.
I can implement so that what happens to your material goods, I am simply the administrator, and my siblings won't blame me for what gets done.
Yeah, that's reasonable. Still an icky conversation, but I think that's an approach I can take on my next visit. So
Um, what I think from the chart is that when you've had conversations that go to the depth of your soul with your parents, they ask you questions that you may not have answers for.
so we're guiding that conversation. I should have them ask me questions.
No, I'm saying in the past,
Hmm.
if I look at the etiology of why you may be reluctant to have a conversation with them, I'm looking at this Aquarius aspect being opposite. Well, we have a fixed sign to a mutable sign, but we have a fixed sign to a fixed sign with your dad, a little bit wide, but I'm looking at all of this stuff and how it would have impacted you as a child and thinking you were getting a lot of input about what they wanted you to do in the world.
Mhm.
And you didn't want to do in the world. You wanted to be in yourself.
Mm,
And so bringing up something and expecting that there's going to be pushback to you is part of your reluctance.
mm, mm.
But they also, especially your mother, but your father as well, see the Aquarius in the eighth house when we put you in the center?
Mhm.
If you communicate from a higher place of understanding, they will get it and respect it.
What do you mean by higher place of understanding?
If you were to say to them, I've been thinking a lot about my relationship with my sisters,
Mm,
and I don't want that to be damaged based on what happens later to the two of you.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking about how I need to communicate with them about what you want done, based on your will.
Mhm.
I think they'd have a lot of respect for that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting. I was kind of nuancing that question in my head last night, and I wasn't quite there. So I appreciate this. Also, the the observations of just early life with them is quite informing. I really am kind of getting back to a place that I don't remember feeling or being, but I feel pretty solid about it now. So, and then
Uh,
the
what I've noticed in the people who are in the classes, and what I've noticed in myself and Marvin, is that as we're going through these paths of intelligence, both of us are remembering things that we had forgotten.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, for sure. You said something earlier too about yeah, instilling values early on and lots of them, or and not ones that I think I was allowed to test. So it was just accepted. And talk to you a bit about my recent family history and things that I've been learning, and something my dad said like a couple of weeks ago to people playing cards was, um, he said like the family was always keeping secrets, and he had
Hmm.
never said that before. But as you and I have discussed, like it turns out there's a bunch of things that were very strange. Those time frames that you brought up, like the 1956 through 71, when I think about what was going on with my family at that time, it's pretty interesting with what's going on today. So, for example, my parents moved from Scotland and England to Canada, moved to Malton, well, eventually Malton, Ontario, where I told you before, I think this company called Avro Canada existed, and they made like fighter jets in the 50s that were ahead of American technology. And one day the whole program was just shut down. Diefenbaker was the prime minister, shut down, no notice. People were committing suicide because they had built careers in this town, thinking they were there for 20 years, mortgaged everything, and one day their careers were gone. So it was a big black mark on Canada's history, and like all the planes were scrapped and destroyed with no evidence. Like it was really a cleanup or a cover up almost in a way. But I always knew my grandfather on my mother's side worked there, but I thought he worked on these planes, but he didn't. Turns out, only finding out from my dad 6 weeks ago, and in a nonchalant setting, it wasn't like this is a secret. It was like, oh yeah, of course, Bubba worked on this thing called the Avro car, which was a flying saucer being developed in Canada for the US government to build hovering silver dishes, right? And if you go on YouTube, it turns out the Avro car is documented everywhere and listed as a giant failure, except they show it doing what a flying saucer should do. So was it a giant, uh, was it a failure, or was it like, okay, let's show it as a failure. Now we'll take it to phase two. So just interesting that that's my family history. At the same time, or in that same time frame before I arrived, then there was a big, I'm possibly oversharing here a little bit, but my mom's sister met a man who convinced her, from what I understand, to leave the family, like just literally leave. And she left for 25 years and only made contact, I think, once. And then one day returned just shortly before I got married. And that caused a lot of family grief, because all of a sudden, and my grandparents moved out west, and just a whole bunch of stuff that by the time I arrived, there were seemed to be like family secrets. Um, it turns out this fella that married my mom's sister he was a psychologist and was keeping a file on her. Like basically, she found a filing cabinet full of just his research on her. Like she was a use case. So possibly again oversharing, but pretty sick, pretty awful. And when she discovered that, she was done.
So
And
she
then
left.
yeah, yeah. But through difficulty, it wasn't time in her life that
Did
I
they
think.
have children?
Yeah, three.
Hmm. And did the children stay with the mother or align with the father?
I think today more aligned with mom, but at the time aligned with the father. I think partly because she was out, right? She left. I'm assuming from optics, she left dad, and she probably didn't share the hurt and the pain with the kids, right? So yeah, so just a really weird time. Like by the time I arrived, I think that was the anxiety in the air of the family. That was like a family like it's not so much a secret, but like it'd be embarrassing. Your daughter just vanishes from the family, like the optics of that. I think there was a very proud family. So yeah, just and it was during that time frame. And here we are, like people are talking about disclosure and aliens and Pluto and Aquarius. Like to me, all these dates are very, very interesting. So yeah. I don't know what I'm saying there, other than it's really interesting to reflect on those things and then start asking questions and start digging. And the things we
So
find.
one of the
I think,
questions, if your grandfather worked on UFO technology, um, was he conscious? And was he interested in esoteric and consciousness kind of things? I mean, I would assume that you don't get involved working on UFO technology if you don't have some interest. Be interesting to have his chart if you have it. And
I have to dig that up, yeah.
you can always go on Ancestry and look at the birth records.
Mm.
And um, birth certificates are posted on Ancestry. And my grandson does a lot of research on Ancestry, and he actually found things. He found the name of our grandparents. He found relatives we didn't know existed. He found birth certificates. And, we got times for grandparents that we didn't even know their name.
Mm.
Uh, so Ancestry is a good resource if you want times or stuff, because they have records of everything.
My mother right now is fascinated with ancestry and building a family tree again. So like quite literally, she's been digging herself. The other thing, and I know I've shared this with you before, but I want to share it here, based again on the astrology you were showing, and your question about my grandfather being conscious. It turns out, and I only again found this out a few months ago, both my grandfathers and my uncle were Masons. Never mentioned it, like you'd think you'd possibly just say, hey, we used to, or whatever, right? And of course, I live right across the street from a Mason Hall now. And my own digging into Masons, the Tree of Life is a big part of the basis of their teachings. Um,
My father was a Mason.
yeah. And
Marvin's father was a Mason.
right. So like I'm still trying to figure all that out, but for some reason the family stopped, it seems. Um, and like my last name, Walbridge, like stone mason, like without a doubt, my family lineage and my 23andMe, which is if you've ever done that test, like I've looked at a lot of other folks and everyone's got like 1% this or 2%. I'm like Whitey McWhiterson. Like I am 99.6%, from the UK. And I don't know, there's just something very interesting about how our family wasn't spiritual whatsoever. Like I would have described us as atheist, although we didn't really have a horse in any race. It was just that would be the easiest way to describe our family's approach. Um, and yet here I am fully feeling connected to spirit, having
I
unlocked it.
think I think if we look, Sean, at the history of the 1900s, the Great Depression
Mhm.
and people who went through it um, lost faith.
for sure.
And your parents were part of that generation that came up, right around the Second World War. And it was a very interesting political time. Uh, Very scary because of the threat of nuclear war.
Mhm.
And I remember growing up in the 50s, and we had drills to go under the desk in school.
Mhm.
I mean, the war had ended, but the Cold War was around.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people during the Second World War, because of the Nazis and of Germany, lost faith.
Mhm.
And were afraid of any system and didn't realize that being atheistic or communistic or, it was a reaction to individualism and to self-determination and to freedom.
Mhm.
And it began to erode away individual rights.
Mhm.
So you have to put your parents' background into the history.
For sure. Yeah, I my parents don't and grandparents didn't talk a lot about then, but what always came up was the Cuban Missile Crisis being very scary. Um, my grandmother always talking about how she used her gas mask box as her purse, and so did everyone else in Liverpool. Like they didn't want to carry their gas mask, they just pretended to, but in it was their purse because they were like, I guess it was just like, fuck it, if it happens, it happens, right? They didn't really believe it would help. Um, and my mother often talked about how she didn't get to eat eggs for 6 years. Like just the rations were so extreme that having an egg was Christmas, right? Like, so that sort of fear, lack, terror was heavy. My grandmother spoke, and I went to Liverpool a year and a half ago and actually went to the site, but so I just felt like I needed to. But during World War II, she went to work one day and they had bombed the building she was in before she got there. So she went to work and had to step over bodies that were covered in newspapers to go to her desk. And her job was to do accounting of records. And so that everything was covered with water and they were like reproducing people's birth results. And so that's going to leave a traumatic PTSD mark that at the time no one would have had time for to address. So yeah, the family, there was a big disconnect from spirit around that time, I'm guessing. And at the
Well,
time,
you survive a war. You either get more faith or
yeah.
less.
Well, it really seems like the spirit was knocked out of the family. And specifically, so again, on that grandfather's side, the flying saucer guy, um, he and both my mom and her sister always had issues with their second toe, their index toe.
Hmm.
And I think predominantly on the left foot, to the point where like they don't show their feet, right? Because the toe folds over the big toe. And I think I told you in recent months, I've had like that's been an area of concentration in release metaphysically. And in my metaphysical book, that left index toe is the connection to spirit. And
Hmm.
so it's almost like my grandfather knew in himself he had spirit, but somehow couldn't do it anymore. And his body was reacting to that. It was, responding to that. So it's just very interesting. Their bodies actually, you know, conformed, changed. And, I think my mother had a name for it. Like the medical community would just say it's this. It seems pretty clear to me. It was the spirit was trying to come out of them and couldn't. So, anyways, been a very, very interesting couple of months tracing all that back. Yeah, so I don't know. Weird. Actually, neat. Been replacing the word weird with neat lately. It's more,
Well, the more information you can get, the more
mhm,
stories you can get, the more you can clear.
mhm.
So since your mother's interested in ancestry, you have an opportunity to have a dialogue with her about all of the ancestry and to have her tell you stories of what she's found. She would love it, and you will get so much information.
I wonder I wonder if she'd love it. It might actually be a great fun bonding thing, or it might be like, oh, this is bringing out all sorts of things.
No, you can ask her.
Yeah, it's true.
Just say, Mom, I know you're interested in ancestry. I'm interested in the history of the family.
Mhm.
Can you tell me what you found? Would you be interested in telling me what you found?
Cool. Yeah, that's
I
good.
actually, my grandson um, was interested in ancestry. So at one point I said to him, okay, I'll pay for the subscription. He said, well, it's so expensive. I said, it's not expensive at all. So yes, I'm getting you the subscription for ancestry. So he got busy and he put together, and then one day I was on a walk like last year, and he called me and he said, well, I found the real name of our family, of our grandparents, and I found cousins, and I found this, and so he started telling me all the things he found. I scheduled a Zoom meeting for relatives we have no contact with.
Mm,
Just sent out an invitation. I said, Noah is going to go over the ancestry. So a whole bunch of people I almost never talked to came on the call, and he found so many interesting things. Relative celebrities we're related to,
mm,
um, cousins, and where the family came from, and dates and names, and it was fascinating.
mhm.
And he keeps finding more. And I said to him recently, well, maybe we should do another call now that you have all this additional information.
Mhm.
So your mom might be thrilled to show her research, and maybe she'd want her sister to come, or your dad's relatives, or who knows
Yeah,
what doors could be opened.
that's interesting. Okay. Um, we have some comments here, and I think a question. Okay, this is from Elena, 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 Eli. Can you give me more information about clean language? I feel like that's what I need right now. I capture people's energies, emotions, thoughts. I've been learning to stop it all my life. Thank you.
Um, a few clean questions. What do I know now? What difference does it make? Given this, what do I want to have happen? Given this, what else is there? Uh, when I know what do I know? And what difference does it make? A clean language question has no kinesthetic, auditory, or visual cues. It goes deep to the spiritual core of a person because there is no input leading them in any direction. So, what I've found is when I'm working clinically with someone who wants to deepen, I use clean language.
Mhm.
Clean language works with metaphors. So, the goal is ultimately to get an image or a memory and work cleanly to take the person inside themselves for what they actually experienced without interpretation. And the resources you can check out are David Grove was the originator. Kai Davies Lynn was his wife, his ex-wife. He and she developed the clean language system. Kai lives in London or outside of London and teaches it. Many of the other people working in the clean language field are not purists and are not skilled the way Kai is skilled. So if you're going to explore it, stay with the original work, not the derivatives that have distorted it.
Yeah. I'll ask Nami to help me make a note of those, and we'll put those in the comments as well. So that those are, I find myself like trying to recall questions, but even just clarity on the why, the purpose, and the intent of the question, that helps a lot.
I think I wrote a paper on it that may be published as one of my blogs.
Okay, is that on Mop2 or is that on your?
I think it's on Mop2. I have to check that the links. I will publish it on Mop2. We do have a Four Worlds page now. And anyone in my classes can post on that page. I will give you the login this next week. Charles was putting the header on, and I will post some articles over the weekend to get it started.
Cool. Raven has a question here for you. I have a question about the astrology aspect of the four worlds, like the birth chart of them. How do we use those energies in everyday life, especially with Saturn return?
You look at the house. We have four elements. The four elements correspond to the four worlds. Taurus is the physical body. Leo is the mental body. Scorpio is the emotional body. And Aquarius is the spiritual. So you can take those three houses that go between 8th, 9th, 10th, let's say, and they have nuances. Nothing is pure, but you can read them in accord with what you know about the worlds, what you know about the paths of intelligence in the worlds. Raven, you're not in the Four Worlds class, so it's a little more difficult, but ultimately I will be publishing the documents, and that will open everybody to being able to understand the paths of intelligence and the way the worlds actually operate. But keep in mind what the qualities of the worlds are and read the astrology accordingly.
Cool.
Any other questions?
Not at the moment. I have one left over from a conversation with Naomi the other day. I think in the last, she was referencing either the last class or the webinar, you were talking about planning pregnancies, like timing them. And I even wrote down like planning divine beings, question mark. Like, do you want to elaborate on that a bit? So I have some friends who are both very athletically minded. The one fellow is a 6'8" beast of a man, was like an Olympic rugby player. And then his wife, very athletic basketball player. They were having a child, and they were, I recall, planning the birth time of their child to be maximized for sports. So the idea is plan for your child to be born in, I think, February, because that child, when they enter school and enter sports seasons, would be 8 months larger and like than most of the other kids. So it would give the kid a competitive edge. So, in my mind, I'm like, oh, it's a lot of pressure on that kid to be an athlete. But that's one perspective of planning a pregnancy. Another, you mentioned like it was around astrology, like timing. Can you elaborate on that? Like, what would you, if you were to give, well, you're probably not giving advice, but how would you comment on that?
I think that when somebody wants to have a baby, it comes from a spiritual place.
Mm, mhm,
And, I remember before I decided to get pregnant with my son, a friend saying to me, when are you going to have a baby? And my answer was, having a baby is a 24-hour a day responsibility for the rest of your life. I'm not ready to take that on until I'm ready to take that on.
mhm,
And the taking it on came from an inner knowing of timing. And when I decided I wanted to get pregnant, I wanted to get pregnant. It didn't come from my mind, it came from my soul.
mhm,
And I know the moment I got pregnant with my son. I know the moment I got pregnant with my daughter. Um, but it wasn't mentally planned. It was a drive coming from deep within.
mhm.
And I am not in favor of using astrology or planning characteristics you want your child to have. I
Mhm,
think it's mental world, emotional world, ego,
mhm.
and doesn't allow the universe and spirit to give you the child you need.
Right. So
So,
what would be when would someone know they're having a spiritual response to deciding to have a child? Like, or at least planning not using birth control, for example.
well, if you decide, I mean, I think for a woman, um, there's a time when you really want to have a baby or not.
Mm,
It's a instinctive drive, and I don't think the mind should enter into it. It's intuitive. It's I am influenced by what my mother told me. She often told me about a friend of hers. Now, my mother was 21 when she had her first child, and I'm the youngest of five. And she said to me she had a good friend who they got married at the same time. And when my mother wanted to have a baby, she wanted to have a baby. And she did. And my oldest sister and brother are about a year apart. Um, her friend decided not to have a baby until they were financially secure. And they never got financially secure enough to decide that they had enough money to have a baby.
right.
And my mother said to me, don't make a decision like that based on external circumstances because it's that important a decision. You want it to come from the core of your being. You don't want it to come from your head.
Mhm,
And she said, if you wait for the right time, it will never happen. So when you feel it, do it.
mhm,
That's exactly what I did. I I got pregnant with my son when I was writing the proposal for my dissertation. I started teaching college well, I started teaching college while I was pregnant with him, but then when we moved back to Chicago, I was teaching a full-time college load 3 weeks after he was born. And I arranged it so that I taught 2 days a week from 10 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. And the rest of the time I was home with my baby
Mm.
and working on my dissertation. So I certainly followed my mother's advice, and it was good advice. I think it's not a mental decision. The mental world should not enter into a decision because your child is going to be with you the rest of your life, ideally. And it's a spiritual bond.
Mhm.
If you keep it that way, you don't want a child where it's a mental world relationship
Mm.
because that's not going to work.
And I would be willing to bet that a lot of children have arrived here due to mental world
I
decisions,
would think so.
right? So, interesting. Yeah,
I also, when I was working at the Children's Day School in my postdoc, um, I asked a key question on the intake that nobody else had ever asked. I said to the parents, was this a planned pregnancy? Every single child who was in therapy at the day school was an unplanned pregnancy.
mm,
And I swore that I would never have an unplanned pregnancy because the child is coming in and the parents have been blindsided. And they may or may not have feelings that are negative about that pregnancy that get transmitted to the child.
mm,
So you want a child to be welcomed into conception. You want it to be conscious and spiritual.
mm,
But that was an interesting piece of data that I still don't know has been tabulated. It was just my informal, so we was so and so planned pregnancy. And every single child at the day school with psychological issues, they were mostly 6 years old or 7 years old to 10 years old.
mm,
Every single one of them was an unplanned pregnancy. Very interesting fact.
mhm. I want to, if we've got time, I want to talk this through then, based on just what you were saying there about planning pregnancies and just like environmental stuff. So Wendy and I were ready to have a kid, and we were living in Bermuda at the time. So this would have been 2001. Bunch of stuff happened that made life kind of complicated there, but we were trying for about 5 years. So we probably started trying I think we were starting trying 5 years. It was a while. No success. We're starting to look into testing and other options. And but it hadn't gotten to the point where we were investing a lot of money or time yet. It was just stressful and what's wrong with us as parents or potential parents. Um, so we did a bunch of tests. Everything looked like okay-ish, but we were told, well, in Bermuda, there's no baby doctor specialists here. They only fly down twice a year. You might as well just go home and relax because there's nothing you can do about it for 6 months. Well, Wendy was pregnant the next month, right? It was almost like that relief of, oh, well, okay, let's just not worry about it. To me, always seemed like that probably helped more than anything.
Probably true.
Yeah.
That happens a lot when people adopt a baby and then get
Mhm.
pregnant.
Yeah, I bet, right? Yeah, pressure's off. Um, but then the timing of my first child, my daughter, who ended up being an alien because when you're born in Bermuda, you're not a citizen of that country. You're not allowed to be documented as such because it's all about people would have babies there just so they could have land there, right? So it's a very small place. It's 22 square miles in the middle of the ocean. My daughter was born uh, 4 months after 9/11. And without a doubt, I have noticed that a lot of kids around her age are highly, highly anxious.
Mm.
And, we lived in Bermuda during 9/11. Bermuda had big ties to New York and Manhattan, offshore banking, insurance, all that stuff. I mean, I didn't know anyone in the buildings, but I knew people who knew people in the buildings, like a dozen people. So it was and they were landing a lot of planes in Bermuda, big, big runway there. And international flights, it made sense. So very stressful time. Wendy was actually supposed to fly home to be at her best friend's wedding to be her maid of honor, like 2 days after. So that was grounded. It was quite a intense time. And so my daughter was in the womb during that very stressful time. And a lot of kids were. My daughter's graduation year was also when COVID happened. So my daughter's two, as far as I'm concerned, key moments in life are bookended by two of the biggest events in the last 40, 50 years, right? In the womb, anxious parents. And then the year that you've been planning for 18 years, your graduation ceremony, bookmark committee, what she was going to do the next year, all obliterated, like in 3 days. I remember the texts coming in and the shrieks of tears at the time of canceling trips. And she was supposed to travel for a year with a group called Up With People. She was going to go to Tanzania to help build a building. Like she had a plan, and then it just got nuked. So I don't know where I'm going with that, other than I'm worried about a lot of kids her age because they're all in that bookended time frame, right? The anxiety must be super high. I think just talking about is good.
How does she feel about it, Sean?
I brought it up one day. I brought it up because I wanted to let her know I was proud of her. That's got to be tough.
Or
And there's a
not?
lot of people, well, yeah, for sure. But even just acknowledging that it's a thing. Like, I don't think a lot of people think in terms of why they might be anxious, like outside factors. My daughter would, for years there, and I never really understood why, wanted to know that all the fire alarms in the house worked. We never had a fire. We never had concerns around it. So even in the house we bought a couple of years ago, it had built-in fire alarms, like the kind that are wired in the house. And I still bought 3 Nest fire alarms so that she could have it on her phone as an app to check herself, right? Like they're working, test them. So that helped. I came up with a simple solution to deal with that. But I don't think she knew she was anxious and where it was even coming from. And I gotta think that's a big part of it. That's pretty fucked up. So it's a really messy timeline for a lot of people.
Everybody has a messy timeline.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm biased. It's my daughter.
Um, you can talk to her about it. Talk to her about your concerns about it. And it seems like the concern is that if she plans things, they may be derailed by cosmic events.
Mm. She's very curious about astrology all of a sudden lately. And it doesn't appear to be from my influence. So that's an interesting opportunity for conversation. So,
And share the paper I wrote on Pluto
mhm.
and have her look at the transits of Pluto during her life and what they did. I just did a reading this morning for my granddaughter, who is very self-contained and very quiet. The first year of her life, Pluto was in Sag. And the second year, it moved into Capricorn. She happens to be a Capricorn. And she has her Venus in Aquarius 3 degrees. So when I looked at her chart today, I went, oh my God, this explains it. Because the Capricorn hitting her chart when she was a year old and moving through all of the rest of the planets in Capricorn, and then not moving into the Aquarian, but now it's like, oh my God, she can really soar. It's like she's coming into her true self.
Mm.
And it was so amazing to see. And I was so excited to see it in her chart because I could say to her, this could happen, hang in there. This is likely in 3 months, and this is likely in 6 months, and all of that. But it looking at that Pluto transit, um, the way I laid it out in that document was very revealing, not just in terms of my own life and the different phases of what Marvin and I and the family were dealing with during those time frames, but also gives a picture of what we can expect coming up,
Mhm.
which is wonderful. Freedom and innovation and consciousness. And I'm really excited about it.
Me too. Yeah, there's uh, it's hard. It's if you look at the news, it seems really doom and gloomy, but I don't feel that. So it's
Oh,
nice.
that's the mental world speaking.
Mhm.
We're going to have to stop by 3:30 because I have another call.
Yep, no, why don't there's no more questions, so why don't we wrap this up?
Okay.
Okay,
Why don't I do a little attunement for everyone?
awesome. I'm gonna sit down though, so I don't pass out.
Or fall off?
Well, yeah, if I'm standing up, yeah, I'm gonna sit down.
Okay. Find a comfortable place.
Oh, and sorry, you know what? Can you explain, and it was asked recently, I heard you even describe it, but like describe an attunement. What is the intent? What are you doing? Because I find them hugely powerful. I would describe it like a meditation with affirmations and clean language,
Mhm.
with clean questions. Um, but do you see it any differently, or is there any more to add to that?
Um, I do it as a little meditation, as a self-hypnosis,
That's the
um,
word. For.
where I can give some suggestions and empower people and take them inside and do a little the group as a unit with their mind focused on empowered energy can build collective energy and change the planet.
Mhm.
So if everybody prays and meditates at the same time, there's power.
Mhm.
So that said, everyone find a comfortable place where you can be internal, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth, allowing yourself to just be, allowing your thoughts to come and go as you let go of the mind and deepen yourself into your spirit, feeling the I that is the I when you say I. I am. I know. I think. I do. I am. That I am is who you are. That I am is what you orchestrate, what you want, what you know. Centering within yourself as an empowered, enlightened being, pretending that you're not, can fully empower you to be the divine being you came into this world to be. You know more than you think you know. You have more power within yourself than you give yourself credit for. And your thoughts and your ideas and the way you project them can change the thinking, the feelings, and the life of the people around you. Set your intent to be the best that you can be. Set your intent to know what you know when you know it, and to stand up tall for what you know to be true, and to use very careful mental discernment to see truth from falsity, truth from misinformation, and check out within yourself what is right for you. Sometimes it's important to do things that are not right for you, to live in the world. But when you do those things, know you're doing them consciously. That will save your soul from misinformation about yourself. Know what resonates with you, what aligns with you, and to every possibility of what you can do, honor that. And when you can't, tell yourself why. And be acknowledging of the power of your core, of yourself, to make choices that are good for you. It's important to live in a way that feels good for you, to eat in a healthy way for your body and to listen to it, to transform emotional reactivity with higher consciousness and creative intelligence, and to live in the world with a sense of faith, balance, and wisdom. Your goal is to merge understanding and wisdom within yourself, and as they come together, to feel like you are living your true destiny. As you stay within yourself and meditate every day, ideally, ask yourself, who am I? And what do I want to have happen in my life now? Set your goals and live by them. And send out love and compassion and understanding to those not so fortunate to have the freedom to go within and know who they are. But you have that power and you can use it. The breath cleanses and the breath releases. So with an in-breath now, take in the divine and exhale any stress, any misinformation, any angst that you might have. and bring that energy of calm into your life, living it and knowing you can live it the rest of today and into the future. And from that place there, wiggle your fingers and toes, open your eyes, fully awake, alert, and ready to enjoy the rest of the day and the weekend.
Awesome. Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Thank you for being here. And if you need to reach me, my email is ehp@noblesciences.com.
Excellent. I'm going to